Hello and welcome to another episode of A Contagious Smile. As we all know, it is Domestic Violence Awareness Month, and we have a wonderful lady with us named Dee who is using her platform to advocate as well. She is a survivor and a thriver without question, and she has some really cool things that she uses that we're going to talk about in depth today. Dee, thank you so very much for coming on here with us today. I really appreciate it.
Hi, it's my pleasure. Thanks, Victoria.
So you are actually a member of several different advocacy groups for domestic violence. How did you get into that?
Yeah. I'm a survivor as well. I have a story. For 11 and a half years, I was in a very toxic, narcissistic, abusive relationship. It took me a while to figure out what I was in, and identify it. I read somebody's book, and then all of a sudden I thought, whoa, like they know who I'm married to. Like they're looking into my life. And then I started putting the pieces together. And although it wasn't so much physical, it still was so damaging that it was causing me some severe health issues and stuff, and my children as well. It was causing us all issues. But believe it or not, right before that, I was in a marriage with somebody who was physically abusive and choked me, almost killed me. And I had a child with him. So I had this little pattern that I was in, and I didn't know why. I felt like I kept attracting these type of people in my life. And once I figured that out and started questioning why am I doing this, and started looking into some research about how we make decisions in our life, and usually it has something to do with how we're raised
Yes.
and setting boundaries and stuff like that. So it got me into trying to heal myself so I could change the patterns and my own beliefs and make better decisions, and wanting to make sure my kids made better decisions so they didn't wind up repeating the same thing I did. Because believe it or not, I repeated the things I saw my mother do. So a lot of us do that. We have someone in our life that has shown us that sometimes these things are acceptable, and we repeat it. But yeah, that got me into doing the emotion healing, working on myself. And I learned how to clear negative emotions and traumas from my body. And that took some time, but people that knew me all those years just couldn't believe the difference in me once I got out and started doing the healing work. So I got certified and I started working on other people, and I got involved in several domestic violence support areas, because I really wanted to help other people, and I wanted them to know that they could heal, they could get out, they didn't have to stay. And I think just giving them that power, is so much, because you just feel helpless and hopeless when you're in that situation. And some of it was just listening to people, because when you're in it, sometimes you don't know how bad it is when you're just stuck in there. And yeah, so I started talking with other people, and our stories were so similar. And that's just so much of it, I think, for survivors to know that someone's there for them. And it's so beautiful what you do here, just hearing your story earlier before about the pets. I'm like, I'm still in awe of what you do. It's just beautiful.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. I appreciate that. Did you notice growing up that your norm was not like anyone else's?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
It was
It,
totally different.
it took me forever to realize that I was being groomed into what I would end up walking into. And it took me forever to realize that. And I keep telling everybody now, we have to break the cycle. We have to be the ones to break the cycle, because I'll be damned if I'm going to let my daughter experience any of that. I don't want our children to have to spend their adulthood healing from their childhood,
Yeah.
because it is so toxic. It is so hard. And I don't know if you were the black sheep or the golden child. I was the black sheep, and I was blamed for things I wasn't even there for. I mean,
Wow.
I could be gone for the weekend at my grandparents', and I was blamed for something that happened, and I wasn't even there. And
Wow.
so that makes it really hard. And I tell people all the time, if you're in an abusive situation, and that was a non-diagnosed narcissist situation, there was no physical violence during the childhood, but you're learning that that's acceptable, because that's the norm. It's like, perfect example, my daughter now, when we have dinner, there's no electronics at the table. We have a conversation. We know how each other's days went. We have a conversation. And then, like, on Saturday nights, it's family movie night, and we do things like that. well, she has dinner at a friend's house or something. She's like, it felt so uncomfortable there because everybody's on their phone and they're texting and they're talking to whoever's on the phone. They're not talking at the table with each other. And I kept saying, that's the difference. And
Yeah.
my norm was, being excluded and having the silent treatment and wondering what I did now, why I was never good enough. And I keep telling, especially women, even though it happens to men, is that our kids are watching this and they're seeing, okay, this is how dad or mom treats the other partner or spouse. And then that's okay for me to treat a significant other that way. It's okay for me to allow that to happen to my body, allow somebody else to treat me with disrespect because I'm seeing it in my own home. And
Yeah.
that's the message we've got to try and get out there so the kids realize you deserve an unconditionally acceptable, loving relationship with someone who doesn't put hands on you in an unwarranted manner. That
Yeah.
is the most important thing ever. Life is too short. You need to remember who you were beforehand and make yourself that 2.0 and get out.
Right.
And we don't have enough voices that are pushing that. And that's why I was so excited to have you come on because I know you're doing that as well.
Yeah. Once you've seen it and you've been a part of it, it's like you have to do something. It's unacceptable.
Right.
And especially like you said, the children, like my 11-year-old, she has to be around a toxic environment still per court orders. So she'll come home and tell me things. And I am trying very hard to teach her that it's okay for you to put healthy boundaries. If something doesn't feel right to you, you need to let them know. She's going to have to learn to stand up for herself because unfortunately, she still has to deal with that situation. And that's part of the guilt that I've had to heal on my own, that I was in that environment and had children that are still unfortunately being exposed to this because of our corruption in our family court system. And that's a whole other thing.
I'm
But
right on there with you, 1,000,000%. That's another thing I wanted to talk with you about because I couldn't agree more.
yeah. So I'm trying to empower her. I want her to have a healthy way to deal with her traumas too. And of course, I'm teaching her about what I do about healing, the emotions, because we all get trapped emotions when we go through these events in our life. And it can keep us stuck.
Mm-hmm.
And it can keep us in a place where we don't allow others to love us or to be near us because we can put up walls.
Yes.
And those walls will keep love away from us. They can even keep abundance away from us. Everything is an energy. And I'm learning that this knowledge has been out there since like Einstein. We're all energy, we're all frequency, we're all vibration. And the vibration of shame and guilt, if that trauma is kept in the body, it causes illness, it causes cancer, it causes disease. And if we don't get this stuff out, we're just gonna damage ourselves and we're gonna damage people around us because emotions also pass to our family members and people that are around us too. We all have an energy field around us. So I'm trying to teach her about, what, it's okay if you feel upset or angry about something. Feel that emotion, let it process, recognize what it is,
Right.
and then let's let it go.
Right.
Because you don't need to carry that on anymore. That's not your energy to carry on because you're a beautiful, loving light in this world. And this girl has such a bright light. And I know we all feel that way about some of our kids,
Yes.
And I'm just so like, I don't want this to change. I want her to keep this bright light. So I'm doing as much as I can to prepare her, for what's coming.
Is there any way that they could get court appointed visitation instead of making her go by herself?
Well, as it is right now, we have 50-50 with my daughter, and my 17-year-old son is with his father, and he's been away from me for 3 full years. And he was the one who carried the brunt of the abuse. And it was just a weird situation how it flipped around, and he felt like, this is my opinion, it felt like he had to choose somebody. And because it was 50-50, he had to choose the parent that he felt could be the strong one, the alpha. I didn't want him to feel that way. I wanted him to be able to see us both, have a healthy, loving relationship with both parents. I didn't talk bad about his father because I know that could damage a child's self-esteem. But he kept coming home, with a chip on his shoulder and being angry at me. And this is your fault. and dad's upset and he's crying and he's lonely and you shouldn't have left. He wanted me to leave before, but then after, all the guilt was being dumped on him when he would go to his dad's. So it was so hard seeing him in that situation, and just, it tore my heart out, the stuff he would come home and tell me. And he felt like he had to spy for dad, and tell dad everything I was doing, and got into issues that were just too big for his age,
Yeah. Yeah.
And I said, this is just too much. You're 12 and I don't want to discuss these things with you. We're not really supposed to be discussing the court issues in detail with you. But he's like, well, you don't respect me. Dad tells me all this stuff, and
Seems like dad's pouring toxicity into him.
yeah.
That's
And
awful.
yep, exactly. And it was hard to counteract that because I was wanting to follow their advice, their counseling, and not talk about it. But then my son used it against me to say I didn't respect him because I didn't want to talk to him about it. And, of course, he was being bought computers, games, guns, knives. Now he has a Ford Mustang convertible. He's been given so many things that I couldn't give him, going through a 6-year custody battle that the attorney fees added up to around 200,000, and we're still not done. I'm not kidding. We're still going. So the litigation abuse with the family court system. And I told my son one day, I saw how strenuous it was. And I said, you know what, why don't you go stay with your dad? Because I don't want to put this pressure on you. I don't want to make you feel like this. I don't want to put you in a spot like this. Just stay with your dad until you get some of this anger resolved and you feel a little better. Because I know he was very angry. And, after he left, I didn't know if I made the right decision or not, but I just didn't like him being in that, feeling like that struggle. But I haven't, since then, he's been with his dad for 3 years and pretty much no contact. I mean, maybe a text message here or there, but he usually ignores me. And if I go to pick up my daughter, usually like his dad will be there with his arms folded and my son will be behind him. But if he's not there, my son will come out and see me and I'll get a hug from him and he'll tell me what's going on. And I think he feels safe enough to come forward and talk to me because somebody's not watching him,
Right.
It's different, but
That's awful. Yeah, one of the things I was excited to talk to you about, but I'm so sorry that you know so much about this, is the corruption in the courts. And I hate that you've gone through that. I see it all of the time. And it breaks my heart. I had a little boy who mom had passed away and they were never married. Mom and dad were never married. And the dad was abusive. And he wanted the little boy just for the survivor benefits and the disability benefits. And he choked this boy out. He choked this little boy. And the grandparents tried to get custody. And the court had defects involved and everybody else was involved. And they gave the kid back to the dad.
Of course.
And the boy was like, I don't want to be with him. I don't want to be with him. He hurts me. He hurts me. And they give him back to the dad. And there were loving grandparents that would have taken him and adopted him in a minute. And this dad doesn't want him. He just wants the money. He hasn't, this guy doesn't have a job. He doesn't have a car. He doesn't have a home. He's borrowing a room out of his sister's. And it's like, are you kidding me? You're giving this child who's begging you not to go back to the person that literally choked him out.
Yep.
How is this possible? What kind
I wish I could say I was shocked, but I'm seeing it all the time in these domestic violence support groups. It's such a shame. But it is a money-making system.
It is. It absolutely is. And have you ever thought about going after the termination of rights?
It's just so much with the attorney fees and stuff. And right now, I just feel like my son is going to be 18 in 6 months. And just having 50-50 with my daughter, I'm trying right now to get some balance, and peace in the situation and try to let things calm down because it's just 6 years, and it messes with your whole nervous system, and I've been on this mission to heal. I've done a lot of healing, but every time I go in that courtroom, it's re-traumatizing.
Yes.
It's really hard. You have to go in there with all your shields up, because after you go through first and you realize it's all just a show and it's just a game, it's hard for people to realize that this is not set up to protect you or to help you. really the system is set up to protect the criminals.
It is. Thank you so much for saying that, because it is. It is, the burden is supposed to be to prove your innocence. You're innocent till proven guilty. But it's the victim that gets re-victimized on the
Yep.
stand. Why did you let him do this? Why didn't you do what he wanted? Why? It's all on us.
Yep.
Like, I was interrogated. Well, who saw him break your nose? If I could tell you what time of day it was, what the weather was like, and who was standing around while he broke my nose, then there's something wrong with me,
Yeah.
because I'm
Yeah.
not
It's
looking
not
at my
normal.
surroundings. Right. I'm not watching. Oh, wait, stand here, turn around, watch real quick. He's going to
Right.
smash my face in. We don't do that. And it's like, I have no idea. I'm pregnant. He bashed my face in. I don't know who was watching. Well, maybe he didn't do it. Well,
Right.
what? I mean, it literally doesn't make any sense. And now, look at the numbers. If it's 1 in 4 that is reported for being abused, what are the real numbers that aren't being reported? Because
Exactly.
the cops go out now. It's the most dangerous call for an officer to respond to is domestic violence. They get there. They don't see anything. They might, okay, worst case scenario, they see marks on someone's person,
Yeah.
but it could be self-defense.
Yep.
What do they do with a guy? If it's a cop friend or another officer, which their rates are higher for performing domestic violence, or military, their rates are higher, then they cover for them and they turn a blind eye. It's that brotherhood. Well, more people, I hate the word victim, more victims, if you will, are in jail for self-defense than the abusers themselves.
This is my story. I'm not kidding. During the course of the marriage, I had called the police about 3 times for when he was just not calming down. The rage is so bad. He's punching holes in walls, throwing things at me. And the last time I called 911, I was terrified, shaking. I was in my pajamas because he woke me up from a sleep with this attack. And the police show up. He was rubbing his face, and I didn't know what he was doing. I had pushed him off of me when he was attacking me, and he was rubbing his face outside talking to the police. I saw him outside the window, and I didn't know what it was until later. He tried to make it sound like he was the victim, and the cop buddies, were just standing out there. They arrested me in my pajamas, a mom of 3 who's never even had a speeding ticket, pulled out in her pajamas, arrested me, put me in the cop car in front of my children, in front of all my neighbors. It was the most humiliating thing I'd ever been through in my life. I couldn't understand what happened. And they said, oh, well, the laws are, if somebody touches the other person and admits to it, then we have to arrest them. If the other person hasn't admitted to anything, we can't really do anything. I'm like, this doesn't make sense.
Right. What am I supposed to do? Let him kill me?
Yeah. I could not believe I sit in that jail cell for 8 hours with other women. There were 3 women in there who told me identical stories pretty much. They were defending themselves, and the police showed up. And guess who gets taught the lesson?
Mm-hmm.
It's the woman.
Yes.
I will never call again.
Right.
I totally understand why women wind up with their lives ended.
Yeah.
We're afraid. They don't protect you when they come out there. It's a good old boys club.
It is. It very much is. And it's not okay. It's like, what's it going to take? I mean, I was stabbed, choked, beaten. I mean, the pictures are they're just horrible. And it was all, well, what did you do? And I told him, I said, you know what? I could have done everything right. Absolutely everything right. The dinner on the table, right moment. No food touching each other. The bed made perfectly. The laundry all done. Whatever the case is. Somebody could have cut him off on the way home. Somebody could have yelled at him at work. Somebody could have whatever. The girlfriend could have said, I'm not going to see you tonight. And he's going to come home and make my face his playground. So don't say it's something I did or did not do, because that's not the case. And they don't care. They're just like, well, why did you do it? I didn't do it. What if this was your wife or your daughter or your sister? Would you feel the same way? Of course you wouldn't. It's just like, it's okay. And then this bull crap about, well, they had a bad childhood. I didn't have the best childhood. You didn't have the best childhood, but you don't see me breaking it off into somebody because of it. That's not an excuse that I say is okay. I interviewed somebody who went through a horrific situation. He was sexually assaulted for years, and then he premeditatingly murdered his assailant, like his abuser. And when he came out, now he advocates for the pedophile. And I was like, what? And he's like, well, we don't like to be called pedophiles. It's disrespectful. And I was like, okay, hold on. First of all, you lost your respect when you unzipped your pants, sorry, and you hurt someone. You have no acceptance of respect from me. And he says, well, we're called MAPS. And I was like, what? Well, yeah, MAPS, minor attracted persons.
Oh my goodness.
You have lost your mind. I will not dignify that. It won't happen. And then they said, well, it's not fair when, like in Alabama, they will chemically castrate you and let you out of jail if you are a pedophile. And people raise big, huge fuss about it and say, well, that's not fair. What if they want to have kids? They have no business having kids.
Oh my gosh. Did somebody really want a child around someone like that?
Right. Well, when I interviewed this person, I said, what would you do if your child was, God forbid, molested or sexually assaulted, out whatever word terminology you want to use? And he said, I would help the attacker. I'm sorry, what? And he goes, yeah, I would help the attacker and help them figure out how to, fix himself. And I said, and what about your child? I would let the child be in there. So you're going to re-traumatize the child again. Not only is dad not helping, but dad is assisting the person who did it.
Oh my gosh.
This is the problem that we have. And so his response was, we should not have sex registries, because that money should go to helping the pedophiles get back on their feet. They shouldn't be, and I'm just like, we need a domestic violence registry. I'm sorry. I totally believe that we need a domestic violence registry. And he totally said no, and then you go to court and it's, well, okay. I interviewed the sweetest lady the other day, and she said, I got a restraining order that put him 10 feet away from me. That's it. She goes, I got so sick physically. I got down to 93 pounds. 10 feet away, he's going to chuck something at me and kill me. Yeah. And the court only gave me a temporary with a 10-foot rule.
And that's still not going to stop him if they really want to get you.
That's just going to aggravate him.
Piece of paper.
Right. It's going to give you what? A paper cut? That's all it's going to do.
Right.
That is it. Our laws are not strict enough for that.
They are not.
It is not okay. They could be rehabilitated. No. I don't believe that. I don't believe that if a person could literally do something like that to someone, that you could rehabilitate them. And people can argue with me all day long. People could say I'm whatever. Until you've gone through it and been where we are, I don't expect you to understand. I was doing a speaking engagement, and I had a lady there with her mom, and her mom's like, well, she deserved it. She stayed. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to use you as an example. And I shut her up so quickly. I said, let me ask you a question. I did the 1 in 4. And she goes, no, I would never let that happen to me. Well, good for you for not being one of us, because I'm 1, she's 1, you're 1, and I need another female. And there's 2 out of 4 right there. So let's look at that. I said, if God forbid, you ended up being told you had a brain tumor, would you go to a podiatrist? And she goes, what? And I said, would you go to a podiatrist? Would you go to a foot doctor to tell you how to heal your brain tumor? No, why would I do that? That's ridiculous. So how are you going to go to your daughter, your flesh and blood that you carried, and tell her that you know what she's going through, you know how to deal with this? She's being just outright ridiculous when you have no idea.
Right.
No, you want the best of the best neurologist to come in there and get rid of it and put you in remission. You're hurting her while she is trying to heal and get into remission. Yeah. And she shut her mouth. It's the fact that we have no support. If we do, we're in this alone. And you're absolutely right on that everybody makes it impossible for the victim. We're already fighting for everybody else. Why do we have to prove, when we have plenty of proof on us, that they're doing it?
Yeah. We still have a long ways to go. I mean, I know we've come a long way with women's rights, but after what I've seen, I'm like, wow, it's shocking how far we still need to go to make it safe to be a woman.
Yes. What do you think needs to change in the immediate future? Where do you think are some good steps?
I think part of it is the educating. We're just getting the word out there, because I think there's a lot of people who just don't realize how bad it is. And like you said, what would you do? Would you be okay with this happening to your own daughter? Would you be okay with this person to be around your own daughter? Seriously. If you're okay with that, well, maybe there's something wrong with you,
Exactly. Exactly. In the courts, they're not in favor of helping us at all.
No. And I've heard people say, well, let's get the judges educated. let's get them educated so they know what narcissistic abuse is, coercive control, litigation abuse. And I'm working with some we're trying to get that happening with Peaky's Law and some other things. But still, there are people that are coming against judges that are just biased. Mm-hmm. And they're taking some of these laws and they're using them backwards. It's ridiculous. I heard one story, somebody had used the coercive control and the judge flipped it around and said, well, you're the one that's keeping the child away. I mean, the father was molesting the daughter and he said she was the one that was alienating and just gave the child to the molester. And we're like, okay, so even the laws changed, they're being turned around. Sorry, but
you're fine.
They'll find a way. They'll find a way to use it against you if they really want to. And they make so much money, the court system. They make so much off of making these cases contentious and bringing you back and forth again. It really is a banking system. And I was talking to somebody about that the other day, how it's once you enter into their territory, you're privy to their laws and you have to follow what they say. If you can keep it out of the court system, it's so much better off. But a lot of times it does go there.
Yeah, but you're damned if you do, damned if you don't. If you go in there with marks on your person, then you're just somebody who got bullied. If you don't, then it never happened in the court's eyes. But then you're going to get arrested for defending yourself. You push him off of you, you're going to get arrested and he's going to get, it's okay. She just had a moment. Maybe it was that time of the month. Maybe it was hormonal, whatever it is, just whatever. Let's go have a beer, dude, kind of. And it's, are you serious?
Right. And the judge that I was in front of for a trial, I had a 4-day trial, he didn't even care about the facts. It's like the facts of the case didn't matter. He had a mediator that made up complete lies, had it all backwards, and she had it out for me. And my ex he had even admitted that he had attacked our son, picked him up by the back of the neck, said he was going to kill him. Oh, I just had a moment, where I was upset. I told the judge that he threatened to bash his skull in. He was calling suicide hotlines after he got served, and I was scared to take the kids over there. And I was advised by CPS and my attorney to wait until there was a court hearing before I took my kids over there. That's the scariest time for anyone when they first leave. So much happens right then in those hours. I knew better than to take my kids over there. And my gut instinct said, if you do, you won't see them again. And that was held against me. The mediator had wrote in her report that I was alienating fodder, that I had kept my kids from him for a year. It was only a few weeks before we went back to court. And I showed the judge, this isn't true. A few weeks is not a year. I did not keep my kids for a year. I waited until there was a court order because I didn't want that to be on my hands. And then I made sure they did go see their dad. And I was with them and had regular visits with them while I was there in their vicinity, was with them and, had him, like we went to a restaurant, we went to the movies, and I was there with them because I was too afraid to leave him alone at the time with his mental state.
Right.
And the judge was like, oh, you know what? You're such a good father. You're a high school administrator. I'm sure you're such a good father. And you know what? You did the right thing calling and getting the help that you needed. And I thought, how many moms do I know who've had their kids completely removed from them just for talking about suicide, just for mentioning it? He was literally calling the suicide hotlines and he was congratulated. It's such the good old boys club. And then it was used against me. This mediator, she just kept lying and lying. And I was like, whoa, she just kept adding to her story and perjuring herself. And I thought, he's got her convinced. Yeah. These narcissists are good at putting on a show. This mediator, she was just like blindsided by his charm. I'm a high school principal. I wouldn't do this. And I couldn't believe how the whole thing went. I was just like, am I in a movie? Is this real?
The mask they wear.
Crazy. Yeah, totally.
Yes. So how did you start healing yourself? What are you doing with your energy? Because I know that could help so many people.
Well, a friend of mine had sent this book to me called The Emotion Code by Dr. Bradley Nelson. That book is amazing, changed my life. It taught me about releasing traumas. So I was having a meeting with my attorney, and every time I talked about the event where I was attacked, my left shoulder would shake. Every single time it would shake. And he was a former police officer. And he said, did you know that you have PTSD? I said, no. I'm like, what do you mean? He goes, every time you talk about that event, your shoulder's shaking. And he's like, do you have nightmares? I said, constantly. I've had nightmares. Comes in the house and murders me in my sleep. He's like, you have PTSD. I didn't even know really what that was until that point. So I was reading this book and was getting into it. And they talked about how traumas and emotions can get trapped in your body. And I was still learning about it. So I hired somebody else who was an emotion code practitioner to work on me. And I thought, you know what? The best thing I can do for my kids is to be the healthiest version of myself and to be healed, because I don't want to pass this up to my kids. So I spent the money and hired somebody to do the work on me. And he didn't know who I was, no idea who I was. He just started working on me over the phone, because energy is everywhere. It doesn't matter where you are. He's like, you have a lot of trauma. I'm finding like it's stuck in your left shoulder. He said like the emotion of shock and fear, abuse, like all these emotions he was naming off. And I just started crying. I'm like, what? He's like, yeah, you have all these emotions and they're stuck there. And he said, but you know, he released them. And a couple days later, I realized I wasn't having the nightmares anymore. My shoulders stopped shaking. I was like, things in my body were lining up. I felt happier, more peaceful. I was like, there is something to this. This is real. Sorry.
You're fine.
No, I keep coughing. Maybe talking about it. You know, this funny thing I've learned too is whenever you retell a story or talk about something that's happened to you, sometimes the mind doesn't know if it's the first time or you're going through it again, and it can be re-traumatizing. So even after I've talked about it, I always try to clear energies too, because I know that it can get stuck in there, and I'm feeling like, yeah, I need to do that after this. I don't talk about it a lot anymore, but I listen to others, and then I don't tell them to tell me their story. I just do the same thing he did. I just ask the body, I muscle test. And you can ask the body, because the body knows everything. It's all up here. It's all in your mind. So I ask what emotion the body wants to release. And then we start working on that. We just release layer by layer, whatever's coming up. And I just use the emotion code chart like he taught. And I got certified to do emotion code and body code. Body code goes a little bit deeper. So you can have like energies that you've inherited from your ancestors, and they've proven this scientifically. Did you know that you can look at the DNA strand and you can tell if somebody's had rape in their DNA, if they've been raped?
Really?
That trauma shows up in the DNA, and it can be passed down to the children. So this trauma can be passed down genetically. So I know there's like these Bible scriptures about how things passed down from 3 generations, you know. It's actually scientific. They have proven that. So some of the traumas we have had can also be passed down to our children if we don't do the healing work. So when I'm working on people, a lot of times you'd be surprised, stuff will come up from their grandparents, their great grandparents, and they're like, oh my God, this makes so much sense because this happened to my mom and my grandmother, and it's happened to me. And I'm like, yep, this stuff does get passed down genetically. And you can carry that emotion down the line and pass it to your kids. So it's so important to recognize what those emotions are, to get them released. And that's what I do now is I work on myself, and I have to go back and work on myself every now and then, you know, all the time, because this stuff does come up.
Right.
We have layers of it throughout our life. We picked up from childhood, and I had passed things on to my kids that I didn't want to pass on, but I was able to identify some of those traumas and release them off of them. And I work on them. Sometimes I don't even know it. I'm just working on them. You'll see their mood change, and they're like, it's like, I've been working on them. They don't even know it. You can tap into their subconscious as well. And he teaches that as long as they're under 18, you know, you're their mother, you can work on your children as well and ask if there's an emotion. So I do these sessions by proxy, over the phone, Zoom, or FaceTime, and I just ask if I have permission to work on them. And we identify the emotions and we just start releasing them. And people are seeing amazing results, like I did once my heart wall was clear. I'm telling you, my whole world changed. I mean, literally, like my abundance, the people that I started attracting to my life, like a whole different type of person. And some of the older friends that I had before, which I didn't have many because I was with, you know, they don't like you to have friends.
No, they don't.
But those friends that would have hung around that were kind of like users and had that same vibration, they weren't around me anymore. I was attracting this high vibration of loving people into my energy field. I feel like I met my soul family, through the years. Like, oh my gosh, this is how it's supposed to be. This is how it's supposed to feel, being around people who lift you up, support you, want to see the best for you. And it was not the way I was used to. My whole paradigm, everything has shifted, seriously, energetically. And everybody can do this if they learn that we are energy, we are frequency, and we attract a lot of times the energy that we're broadcasting out, because energy is attracted to like energy. So me doing the self-healing, the self-love changed everything. I don't know why that was so hard, but it's so hard for so many of us to do that self-love, self-care.
Because everybody else goes first, and we are not used to putting ourselves on even in the top running for anything for ourselves.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we think that this is kind of how some of us are brought up. I don't know if you're brought up in some kind of religion or Christianity. I was raised in the Christian church, and it was like humility was the big thing, and doing things for others. And that's awesome. It's amazing, but we need to do it for ourselves too.
Right.
It says love others as you love yourself. We got to start there too, because if we believe we are part of the divine, why wouldn't we love ourselves?
Right. Absolutely.
And if we don't love ourselves, what kind of example is that teaching our children too? I overheard my daughter saying some terrible things about her body one day, and I was like, oh my goodness, am I saying things? Is she picking up what I'm saying? Yeah, I got to stop this. We have to do this because they pick up more of what they see than what they hear. And I feel like if more of our children are empowered with this, just think how much more resilient they're going to be out there in the world. Absolutely. They're not going to accept, a boyfriend or a guy. Or I mean, I know this can happen to boys too, but they're not going to accept somebody being around them that's going to use them and abuse them and treat them like they're less than. Right. Because they're going to know their value and their worth.
So how do people find you in order to get you to start helping them?
I have a website. It's called Lighthouse Energy Healing. I love lighthouses. I've always just loved them. I was like, we should be a light in the world. There's so much darkness, but we can be a light. We can share our story, and we can help others and pass it on like you do. It's so beautiful.
Thank you. Thank you. So they can find you on your website. Where else can they find you?
Yeah. Instagram, Facebook. I'm on everything. I'm on TikTok finally. I keep going back and forth on there. And I use a frequency healing device as well now. I've incorporated that. And that has been amazing, that whole thing, because it's like kind of like making a phone call. You don't see the lines, you don't see the connection, but it's all energy. But you can download this app, and you can scan people at a distance and see what energies in their body are out of balance, because everything, I can't think what I was going to say here, but they use it on astronauts in space too. They've used this technology. It's been around with NASA. But it's like a lie detector. You can talk to it, and it'll pick up the frequencies in your voice and tell you what's out of balance, what's the most overused or the most underused emotions that are coming up. And then they can get a report emailed to them. And so many people have these done, and they're shocked when they look at their report. They're like, how did it know this?
Yeah.
Know this, but we all have an energy signature that is just particular to our body. So once you make a profile in the app, it can find you wherever you are. This energy frequency is just to you, identifies you. So it can scan you and tell you, if you have virus or parasites or bacteria. It can tell, like, if your LDL's out, like a full blood panel in one little scan in like 5 minutes. And you can find all this out. And it's so dang accurate. One of my friends, her husband has a doctor's office here. She's one of the first ones who bought a scanner from me when you had to buy them as a scanner. Now you can just download it as an app. That's how amazing this stuff is. It keeps getting better and better. And she said, did you know you can send your blood work off to 3 different labs and get 3 different results? I was like, what? She's like, yeah, because once you take it out of the body, you know,
Right.
the whole thing, it can change, and you can get, it depends on how they're doing the testing. And she said, I can't believe how crazy this is. You know, it's checking the frequency of it as it's going through your body right there. So that's why it's just so cool. So I use that also to help people.
Well, I will make sure that every way to connect to you is in our listener notes. And I want to thank you so much for coming on here today. I would love for you to come back again, and
Yeah,
you
it'd
would
be
do that.
great.
Yes.
You're awesome, Victoria. Thank you.
Oh, thank
Thank you for
you.
what you're doing. It's just so beautiful. I love
Oh,
that.
thank you. That is so sweet. I would love to have you come back and we can do things one step at a time.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you.